Hello and welcome back to the Kung Fu Book Review. Today, it's not really going to be a Kung Fu book, okay? We're going to have a little exception, but it is definitely a book about fighting. And this is Meditations on Violence by Sergeant Rory Miller. My overall impression of this book is, if you are involved in martial arts, you should buy this book, right? Like, this book is absolutely essential to dispel fantasy from your training, right? To make it about, to separate what the difference between martial arts training, martial arts sort of play, improving skills, etc., and real violence, because I think most martial artists do not understand this. But this guy, Sergeant Rory Miller, he does, okay? This guy has a great background, okay? So he was a competitive varsity judoka and fencer, right? So quite an interesting mix there. But then he became a corrections officer, and he worked in prisons, and he worked with the toughest, in the toughest prisons. And he was one of those guys. He wasn't just a guy, sort of standing on the gate, overweight, whatever. He was basically a SWAT team in a prison, in like a maximum security prison. So when guys go mental and lose their shit, they send, and like high on drugs, PCP, violent, offenders, murderers. He was one of the guys that they send in to take these people down, right? So he knows what real violence is, right? And it's very clear from the writing and from everyone that's reviewed and other, if you've spoken to other martial artists who've encountered him, then you know that this guy is solid, right? But then his martial arts training, so as a result of that, sort of adapted, and he actually got more involved in traditional martial arts, which is very interesting. So, and he found traditional jiu-jitsu, that was his sort of like, that was the best thing that he learned for dealing with these people was that kind of training, which is, most people would say, what, like, you're like a college judo guy and you went to traditional jiu-jitsu to learn how to deal with people? Because there is a difference between sport fighting and real violence. And he's one of the, main proponents of training, like really, really hard and full on, but in a traditional way, which is great because I also think like that, right? So, this overall, just like, I can't give it enough thumbs up. Like if you are involved in martial arts, pretty much any martial arts, right? Even if you're involved in sport martial arts, I think you should read this book, because there's an excellent section in the middle of it where he talks about, different types of violence and different types of martial arts, right? And he's very good. He's very systematic, like breaks it all down, and he's like, this is sport fighting. This is, honor contest. This is, a duel, and this is sort of real, violence, and this is like a military violence, so all these different, so real street violence, so somebody who's out of control, or is, in an altered state, through drugs or whatever, and then also sort of tactical military violence, because he's experienced a whole set of these different things. And it's great, it's just a really well-written book. Let's just go down and break it down. Here's the sort of start of the contents page. He starts off with lots of forwards and acknowledgements, and there's the whole, it's 5th Dan, 3rd Dan, 7th Dan, Black Belt Hall of Fame. All these guys are just like singing him praises. So I don't necessarily always rate that as a means of the beginning of the book, but like it's quite nice to see that there are other top level martial artists who are like, this guy's the real shit. It's got some acknowledgements, people he's worked with, people he's trained with, people he's served with. Nice little introduction and some preface. He's got a couple of, he's quite, he's, American authors, they tend to be quite good at the self-promotion bit, which us Brits are like, like you just might include a little, one paragraph at the end, like, this is where I studied and this is what I did and this is my website. But, he's got like self-promotion bit at the start, self-promotion bit at the end. But it's quite good humor as well. So his about the author at the end of the book is quite funny, actually. So he's like, things that I've done that most of you haven't. Got zapped by a taser, zapped somebody with a taser, right? So he's quite good that he can go from very serious writing about, unarmed defense with a knife and how insane that is and how likely you are to die, to quite light-hearted stuff as well. So it's well written as well as containing a lot of useful information. So then he breaks down into different chapters. So he has like he has a lot of sort of one of the key points about that he sort of acknowledges, and I think is incredibly useful to think about, is to have a kind of sort of tactical matrix or a sort of preset plan, similar to, and it is well documented in the sort of evidence and research, that people that encounter life-threatening situations, if they have a plan ready. So for example, this is quite well studied from the people that survive airplane crashes, right? If you listen to the pre-flight announcement and you know where the exits are and you know what you're going to do, even if you just ran through it once in your head, you're much more likely to survive. So he basically carries this principle over to real life violence. So you just have a sort of a if this happens, do this. If this happens, do this. If I'm in a contained space, then I will fight. Otherwise, I will run. So just a simple sort of decision tree that you've worked through in your head beforehand is enormously beneficial. And I think it's absolutely true. And then really solid section. If you could just read these 15, 16 pages from how to think all the way to thinking in the moment, this also includes how to train and how to think in your training. Like, these 15 pages are some of the best 15 pages in martial arts books that I think I could put down. So just go read it. Then he's obviously got tons of experience with real life violence, and it's peppered throughout with these little anecdotes that are just like, you read them and you're just like, holy shit. Like, dealing with different, this is great when he has his first sort of talk about when he first dealt with a hardened criminal. He was like, oh man, this is the real deal. This guy is he's a stone cold killer, and I'm just some punk kid who's been training at college, with wrestling. Like, is this really going to work? And then when he gets in contact with him, he's just like, blew that fool away, just destroyed him, right? So because the other, he'd been training with college varsity wrestlers, like elite level athletes, and then he went to this guy who was supposed to be this street killer, and he obviously wasn't training hard or doing any of these things. So when he got to put him in a lock, it was easy. It was child's play. So, encouraging on many levels. But he has loads of these little anecdotes throughout, on top of really good information. Really good section on different types of mindsets and different types of criminals and different types of violent encounters. So I think that's really important as well, because that, like you said, there are some that are sort of, it's ego-driven and violence, and then there's a small handful of people that are just, incredibly naturally violent, right? And, 99.999% of the time, you're not going to encounter one of these people in earnest, right? But if you do, then you need to act quite differently. Really good section, chapter 5, on training, where he talks about different training drills, and actually as perhaps the best section that I've ever read, talking about the benefits of kata or forms, and like what forms training can do, which other types of sport training doesn't do. And for him, it's all about that running through and focusing on real violent intention, because you cannot do that with your training partners, right? There's only a couple of places where you can do that type of training, and also it's that setting up that when this happens, it just happens by automatically, right? And being able to train it long hours repeatedly over and over and over and over and over again, which you can do with forms, right? So very good. Like, I recommend it. Page 114, 5.2. If you train martial arts forms, not just for display, then read that section as well. Chapter 6, making physical defense work, also really, really good. Yeah, coming up with a plan, golden rules, things when you will act and when you won't act, so that you act instantly without, so you don't want to be in a situation where you're like umming and ahhing about, is this going to work? Should I do this? When it's the time to act, you just act instantly. And boils those down to a simple series of rules. And then very important as well, chapter 7, afterwards. Yeah. So how to deal with violence, and I think this is absolutely integral as well. So, because again, this isn't often not covered in martial arts training. I've had, I had a formative event that was a violent encounter when I was attacked by several people, a bunch of people with weapons, right, with broken off hockey sticks, right, and I just ran in. I was just like, charge, but then saw all my friends heading in the opposite direction, and suddenly was getting like wailed on by 3 guys with like sort of half broken off like field hockey sticks. So yeah, and it took me, it's taken me a long time to talk about it and deal with it and decompress with it, and that was happened when I was a kid, right? Because these things really stick with you, right? They're lasting events. Like it can take place in seconds, but it can stay with you for a long time, and you do all these like negative system 2 thinking, where you're like running over again and again and again, playing it over in your mind hundreds of times. Should I have done this? Should I have done that kind of thing? And he talks about, therapeutic solutions, talking it out, dealing with it in your training as well, working through these things, and how you need to change and grow. So great. Like, again, not coming from this, a place of, because it's quite easy for someone who's a therapist or someone to jump in and say, oh, you need to do this, that, and that. When they're, maybe they've lived this incredibly fluffy life where they haven't encountered real violence, so they don't have any terms of experience. But this guy, he's writing for people that encounter it on a day-to-day basis in their work, and how to deal with it, and not just bury it, right? Actually to deal with it. So again, yeah, a good like 20 pages at the end of just really good material. And then closes off with a good bibliography index, etc. Because he's also, it's well referenced as well. So, and he suggests lots and lots of additional reading. So the bibliography is very strong. Books on self-defense, books about criminals, the criminal justice system, and different martial arts books. So, yeah, excellent book. Short, 180 pages, dense, small text, well written. It's not a kung fu book per se, but it is one of the best books about martial arts that you can possibly get. I would even recommend it to people who are doing martial arts just for display and for fun and for health and stuff, because it will make you think about what you're doing and why you're doing it in a way that you probably haven't before. Yep. Sergeant Rory Miller, if you're out there, you ever watched my review? Fabulous book, sir. Well done. Good. Okay. Let me know if you want me to review other books that are sort of in the martial arts world, or going into this sort of self-defense, personal protection category, because again, I do have quite a few of these. So, let me know. Please do like, comment, and subscribe, and we will be back to more kung fu-y books in the next episode. See you all soon, and stay safe.